I had just sold my company for $60 million. That night, at the most expensive restaurant in the city, my own daughter poured something into my wine glass, while my son-in-law kept me distracted with a story about a painting on the wall. I only knew because a terrified young waiter pulled me aside and told me everything. What I did in the next 15 minutes changed all of our lives forever. If you believe the people closest to you can also be the most dangerous, stay with me, because this story earns it. My name is Peter Shaw. I'm 68 years old. I built Apex Biodyne from a rented garage with 2 employees and a dream, and I never let the money change me. Same house, same 7-year-old sedan, same quiet life I shared with my late wife, Laura, before cancer took her 3 years ago. Laura never trusted my son-in-law, Ryan Ford. He doesn't see Emily, she used to tell me. He sees a safety net. I laughed it off. I told her he loved our daughter. I was wrong, and it took me 3 years and 1 dinner to understand exactly how wrong. Emily and Ryan lived a life I didn't recognize. Cars that cost more monthly than my mortgage. Vacations I'd only seen in magazines, and a vague import-export business that I, as a numbers man, knew was drowning in debt. After Laura died, Emily grew distant, guarded, as if protecting Ryan from me. Then 6 months ago, when word leaked that Apex Biodyne was being acquired, they suddenly reappeared in my life, full of concern about my paperwork, my investments, my transition. I was lonely enough to mistake their greed for love. That night at the restaurant, Ryan raised his glass and called me a legend. Emily said she was proud of her daddy. But their eyes weren't proud. They were hungry. And then Ryan asked an odd question. What happens to all the shipping infrastructure now that the company's sold, the climate-controlled containers, the routes? Strange thing for a man in textiles to care about. I filed it away and excused myself to take a call confirming the wire transfer. 60 million. Cleared. Walking back, a waiter blocked my path, hands shaking so badly he could barely hold his tray. His name was Evan. He told me that the moment Ryan distracted me with a comment about a painting, Emily took a small glass vial from her purse and poured a white powder into my wine. I asked if he was certain. He was. I gave him $500, told him to say nothing, and walked back to that table as a different man on the outside than the one raging inside. I sat down. I looked at my wine and understood immediately this wasn't poison. Poison in a crowded restaurant is messy, traceable. This was something else. Something clinical. I thought of Emily's comments lately about my forgetfulness, missed appointments that were actually canceled and blamed on me, Ryan's pointed remarks about whether I was still fit to manage my own money. It clicked. This wasn't meant to kill me. It was meant to make me look like I was losing my mind. I needed to switch glasses without them noticing. When a passing waiter came to refill water, I let my elbow catch Ryan's glass, sending ice water flooding across the tablecloth. In the 5 seconds of chaos, I swapped my tainted glass for Emily's clean one. Old age, I mumbled, dabbing at the mess. They shared a triumphant look, certain their plan was already working. I raised my glass, her glass now, and toasted to family, and to getting everything you deserve. She drank deeply. 15 minutes later, her vision blurred, her words slurred, and she collapsed into her chair, her body twitching. Ryan didn't move to help her. He froze, and then he tried to control the room. No ambulance. She's just had too much wine. She mixes anxiety medication with alcohol. We'll just take her home. He wasn't trying to save his wife. He was trying to get her away from doctors who might run tests his story couldn't survive. That's when Evan stepped forward and announced he'd already called 911, and I watched something colder than panic cross Ryan's face. The look of a man realizing his plan had just collapsed in public. At St. Jude's, a sharp young resident named Dr. Chen refused to accept Ryan's shellfish allergy story. Her pupils were pinpoint, her airway clear. This wasn't anaphylaxis, this was an overdose, and he was running a full toxicology screen whether Ryan liked it or not. Ryan tried to physically block him. I played the devastated father and begged the doctor to do whatever it took, which was all the permission he needed, to ignore Ryan completely. While we waited, I slipped away and hid near the vending machines, and I heard Ryan on the phone, hissing at someone named Reed. The plan is a disaster. She drank it. The hearing's at 8. How do we get a conservatorship over him if he's healthy and she's the one who's unstable? He hung up, turned around, and found me standing there. I played confused and frightened, and he recovered fast, spinning a new lie. Emily was seeing a psychiatrist, Dr. Reed, for an unstable condition she'd hidden from me, and that maybe my new money had driven her to this. He practically pushed me out the door and into a cab home, desperate to get me away from more doctors. Then Dr. Chen delivered the real diagnosis, a massive, near-lethal dose of olanzapine, a powerful antipsychotic that in an otherwise healthy person mimics the symptoms of a stroke and severe rapid-onset dementia, confusion, slurred speech, psychosis. Not a medication error, a weapon, chosen with surgical precision. They weren't trying to hurt me. They were trying to erase me, my mind, my signature, my $60 million, and put me in a home while they lived on my life's work. I didn't go home. I had the cab take me to Emily's house first, let myself in with the spare key hidden under a dead fern, and sat down at her unlocked laptop. I found the emails in seconds, a chain titled The Shaw Contingency, between Ryan, Emily, and a Dr. A. Reed. Reed had prescribed the olanzapine under a false name and calculated the exact dosage to induce psychosis within 20 minutes. Emily had written that she'd do it at the celebration dinner, that I trusted her, that once I was hospitalized, Reed would certify me incompetent and Ryan would file the petition before the federal audit began. Attached to the last email was a legal filing from Ryan's lawyers, an emergency conservatorship petition, hearing set for 8 a.m., built on testimony from Dr. Albert Reed. They'd planned to have me declared a ward of the state before 9 in the morning. At 4 a.m., I called Harrison Wright, the shark who'd structured my company's acquisition. I told him everything, the vial, the switch, the hospital, the phone call, the emails, the petition. He read the conservatorship filing and let out a low whistle. This wasn't just family fraud, he said. This was conspiracy, medical malpractice, perjury, and it was beautiful in the most disgusting way. Within the hour, his investigator had dug up the piece that made everything else make sense. Dr. Reed was $310,000 in debt to an offshore sports book, and the shell company behind that book traced straight back to Ryan Ford Imports. Reed wasn't a conspirator. He was a puppet Ryan owned outright. And then I understood the real motive behind Ryan's endless questions about my shipping routes. My company moved regulated biological compounds through federally monitored GPS-tracked containers, the cleanest, most boring part of my business, and exactly the kind of clean channel a smuggler would kill to piggyback on. The acquisition wasn't just a payday Ryan wanted. It was a disaster he needed to stop, because a $60 million sale triggers a mandatory federal audit of every shipment for the last 5 years. He didn't need my money. He needed control of the company before that audit exposed him. At 6 that morning, Ryan called, his voice dripping with fake concern, telling me Dr. Reed was on his way to my house to check on me for my own good. I gave him exactly the confused, panicked performance his petition needed, then agreed to go straight home. He thought he'd cornered a frightened old man. He had no idea I was sitting in a downtown law office in a $5,000 suit, watching the sun come up with a lawyer who was already calling the FBI. We arrived at the courthouse early and waited outside courtroom 3B, watching through the door's small window as Ryan paced in his best suit, pale and sweating, while Dr. Reed sat frozen on a bench, dabbing his forehead. I heard Ryan whisper to his lawyer that this was even better than planned. Reed had gone to my empty house, gotten no answer, and now I was officially a missing, dangerous, incompetent old man wandering the city. Wright's hand stopped me from moving. "Let them lie to a judge first," he said. "Let them build their own gallows." Inside, Ryan's lawyer painted a devastating picture. A violent, paranoid old man who'd attacked his own daughter and vanished into the night, a danger to himself, with $60 million he could no longer manage. The judge was moments from granting the emergency guardianship when Wright pushed open the courtroom doors, and I walked in beside him, calm, sharp, dressed for war. Ryan's face went the color of old candle wax. Dr. Reed made a small strangled sound and looked at Ryan like a man betrayed. Reed took the stand first and tried to hold the lie. Rapid decline, dangerous confusion, incapable of managing his affairs. Wright dismantled him in under 5 minutes, producing 20 years of real medical records showing a doctor who'd never treated me until 6 months ago, catching him in a direct lie about visiting my home that very morning, when I'd actually been sitting in Wright's office the whole time, and then placing a bank statement on an easel showing $310,000 flowing from a Ryan Ford shell company straight into Reed's offshore gambling account. Reed shattered on the stand, sobbing that Ryan owned his debt, that Ryan had handed him the vial and told him exactly what to say. Ryan lunged across the courtroom screaming that I was the violent one, that I'd poisoned my own daughter, before 2 FBI agents who'd been quietly seated in the back rose and tackled him to the floor. Special Agent Davies read him his rights on the spot: conspiracy to commit fraud, interstate smuggling, bribery of a medical official. I stood and gave the judge the full truth. My daughter had tried to drug me, yes, but only because she drank from the wrong glass. And the real reason behind all of it was Ryan using my company's federally cleared shipping lanes to smuggle goods he could no longer hide once the audit began. I watched him dragged out in handcuffs, and for the first time all night, I felt nothing but exhaustion. I went straight to the hospital afterward. Emily was in a psychiatric wardroom, hollow and pale, watching the news coverage of her husband's arrest with tears streaming down her face, still performing shock, still lying by instinct even now. I told her plainly that I knew she'd understood exactly what she was doing when she poured that powder into my glass, that she'd chosen Ryan and the money over the father who'd given her everything. She broke, sobbing that she'd go to jail, that she'd lose everything. I told her no. I would pay for the best legal defense in the country to argue coercion, and I would pay for the best rehabilitation program money could buy. Her relief lasted exactly until I finished the sentence. The $60 million was going into a trust I alone controlled. She would never see a cent of it. She would have no allowance, no credit card, no safety net. She would, for the first time in her life, learn to work. 6 months later, I was back in my old ranch house, sitting in Laura's armchair in the afternoon light. Evan, the terrified young waiter who'd saved my life, was no longer wearing a uniform. He was in a sharp suit now, my personal finance manager, delivering quarterly reports at my kitchen table. I asked about the shelter I'd funded with the first $5 million from the trust, the one that gave people with nowhere else to go a place to rebuild. He told me Emily had finished her first full week there, assigned to sanitation, and that she'd cleaned every toilet in the building without complaint. Good, I said. That's good. I looked out at the old oak tree Laura and I had planted 40 years ago, its leaves just beginning to turn gold, and for the first time since that dinner, I felt something close to peace. I built an empire out of nothing, and almost lost it to the 2 people I trusted most. What saved me wasn't rage. It was patience. The same patience Laura always told me I'd need, if I'd only learned to listen sooner. If you were sitting where I was that night, would you have switched the glass? Or would you have let the truth come out on its own?